This year's college football playoffs kind of created a lot of controversy, and it sparks the question, is the college football playoff system broken? Yesterday, the college football playoffs finally were able to be set, and it came out with some shakeup up at the top. Of course, Michigan comes in at number 1, Washington at number 2, Texas goes all the way from 7-3, and Alabama with their win over Georgia sneaks in at number 4. So let's just go ahead and dive into each of these teams first, and then we can kind of talk about, the dominoes that fell after that. Coming in at number 1 is, of course, the Michigan Wolverines. Michigan, led by their head coach Jim Harbaugh and quarterback J.J. McCarthy, had a great year this year. They were able to stack wins on top of wins, but of course their season was always going to come down to how do they fare against their two big dog opponents in Penn State and Ohio State. They pretty well dominated both of those teams, especially with Penn State. They controlled that game all the way through. And then when it came down to Ohio State, that was a great game. And the winner of that game was going to come and be able to be in the college football playoffs. It ended up being Michigan. Michigan was just too much for Ohio State to handle there at the end. Ohio State had their chances, but they could not get it finished. And that just signed, sealed, and delivered Michigan into the college football playoffs. Of course, they did have their Big Ten championship game, which basically was a snooze fest, and no one probably even watched it other than Michigan fans, because Iowa is Iowa, and they were not going to be able to compete with Michigan. So Michigan comes in at number 1, of course, with the big upset with Alabama over Georgia, and that sets up Michigan pretty nice. Before we continue to get in this video, guys, as always, if you would like this video, that way it pushes out to a larger audience, and subscribe, that way you don't miss any more content. All right, keep going. So now Washington Huskies, Washington University comes in at number 2. I don't see how many people could argue about Washington being at number 2. Washington, throughout this college football season, probably one of the most consistent teams across all of college football, along with Michigan. And really, Washington had to prove doubters wrong all year, and they did exactly just that. Of course, with the big win against Oregon earlier in the year. Then they take Williams and USC down. And then it all came down to the end at the Pac-12 championship game, where Oregon was a -9 favorite over Washington, despite being undefeated and despite beating Oregon earlier in the year. And Washington did exactly what they've done all year, which is impress and win football games. And they knocked off Oregon again. So this, to me, is just not surprising. At some point, you gotta get on board and say Washington is a damn good football team. They deserve to be in the college football playoffs. And Penix Jr. is a Heisman candidate prospect out there who leads Washington, and they are definitely deserving of the number 2 spot going into the college football playoffs. So coming in at number 3 is the Texas Longhorns, and this is the one that kind of shocked a lot of people, and there's some controversy regarding Texas and things like that. Me personally, I thought Texas was completely screwed when the rankings came out before the conference championship weekends, where they were ranked number 7th. Never in the college football playoffs era has a team came into the conference championship weekend ranked number 7th and then been able to jump everybody and get into the college football playoffs, let alone they got into number 3. But Texas has a great resume. They've killed a lot of teams throughout the process. They have a great win early in the year at Alabama, who, of course, just took down Georgia. They dominated the Big 12 championship. Of course, they did lose a close one at the end of the game against Oklahoma. But since then, Texas has just continued to do their job throughout. They win the Big 12 championship, and they got some help along the way. And that is what has Texas in their first college football playoffs ever in this era. But, there's a lot of people who still believe that Texas really should not be in over a few of the selected teams that are currently out of the college football playoffs. So that is number 3. Coming in at number 4 is the biggest turnaround, and it probably was the biggest headache for the college football playoff committee, and that is the Alabama Crimson Tide. Alabama, of course, had the early issues going on into this year. They lost to Texas. They were dealing with issues at the quarterback position, trying to find a quarterback to take that job and stabilize everything and be able to steer the ship. They finally got it in Jalen Milroe as he finally took over, but Alabama still fought and came up with some close wins down the stretch. Honestly, should have lost against Auburn, but they find a way to get that win. And then it led them to have another opportunity to win the SEC championship game. And if they did, it was always going to create tons of controversy, and that's exactly what happened. Alabama pretty well handled Georgia, and now Alabama, coming in at number 4, completely kicks out Georgia, who was the previous number 1 and the back-to-back college football national champion. And Georgia's out, Alabama's in, even though they passed up an undefeated Florida State team. That is where we go to next. Florida State, 13-0, the first time ever a Power 5 school has been undefeated and not selected into the college football playoffs, and it has people just at a complete uproar about this decision, saying the college football playoff system is broken. But the committee basically said, listen, they do not have their starting quarterback, and they are a completely different team now without being able to have Jordan Travis as their quarterback. And while I know there's a lot of people out there who just think this is totally unfair, and it completely sucks for Florida State fans. It does for those Florida State football players. Teams are built up of more than just one player, and I get that. I totally get that. And it's probably not right. It's not. But guys, just look at the eye test. At the end of the day, the College Football Playoff Committee is supposed to select the top 4 teams in the country. And in the current state of Florida State football, they're not in the top 4. They're just not. Taking away Jordan Travis, they're not better than Michigan. They're not better than Washington. They're not better than Texas, and they're not better than Alabama. Like Georgia, they're not better than Georgia. They're going to face Georgia in their bowl game, and as long as a lot of players don't just not play that bowl game for Georgia, Georgia's going to handle them. And so that takes us to Georgia as well. Like, honestly, I could have saw a scenario where you put Georgia over Texas. I mean, Georgia is the back-to-back defending national championship team, and Texas is able to jump them all because, Georgia had an extra game and they lost in the SEC championship to a damn good Alabama team. But then Texas had the head-to-head over Alabama, so how could you have put Alabama in over Texas? I don't know. Guys, I'm happy and I'm glad that I don't have to select this, but damn, it sucks for Kirby Smart and the Georgia Bulldogs football team that just did their job all year, and then you lose a tough game to Alabama in the SEC championship, and now you're out. I don't know, but I definitely would have had Georgia up in front of Florida State. I get it for Florida State fans, but it's just unfortunate. And at the end of the day, after losing Travis Jordan in the injury, like, if Florida State would have just came out and finished their job and beat Florida handily and beat Louisville handily in the ACC championship game, there would be no worry. They would be in the college football playoffs, and maybe Bama would be out. I have no idea. But if you ask me, I don't think the system's broken. I just think it's kind of flawed. Let me know what you guys think about this in the comments section below. The college football playoffs are set. Let me know who you think is going to win the college football postseason and the national championship. As always, stay humble, stay kind. Peace.